Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today, we are joined by April, and April is one of the members of the board of directors of the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. She is one of the co-founders and the secretary, and certainly we're glad to have this collaboration this month for Black History Month and learn more about the organization and on all the stories of the board and how they got involved and a little bit about their backgrounds as well as in the legal community. So thank you so much, April, for joining us, first of all. And perhaps maybe you can start giving us a little bit more about yourself, why you got into law, and what it is like working in the legal field.
Okay. First off, I would actually just like to thank you for having me on your show. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with the listeners. As far as my background goes in the legal industry, I've been both a legal assistant and a licensed paralegal for about the past 11 years. So paralegal, for the legal assisting side came first. Then I became a paralegal around 2013. How I got into the legal industry, as a young person, I never really imagined that I would be in the legal industry. And I was one of those people who was fortunate enough to stay in sort of the education process, probably longer than most people do. And eventually it got to a point where I was like, okay, I got to make a decision now, got to get into the workforce and do something. And at the time I'd sort of bounced around, picked here, picked there, and hadn't really thought too much about one particular career. So I did an aptitude test. It wasn't a very detailed one, but I did an aptitude test, and it basically it steered me towards careers that were more along the lines of helping people, like social, sort of the social area. And so it gave a list of not an extensive list, but things like social worker, lawyer, or and things like that. And I said, okay, well, I probably don't want to be a social worker. Let's see what's available in the field of law. So I looked, and obviously there was lawyer. I was like, okay, maybe not, because I'm not entirely sure about the legal profession yet. So let's see what else there is. And I ended up doing a law clerk course at Seneca College around 2009. I did that. I enjoyed it. I graduated with honors. So I'm like, hey, this looks like is the thing that, is what I'm going to be doing. So got into the legal industry after, completing my diploma, worked as a legal assistant for about a month, and realized that, okay, to be a law clerk, you don't just become a law clerk. You start off as an assistant, and then you have to work your way up. So I didn't really like that idea. I liked the law, and I liked everything that I learned, but I'm like, I feel like I could add on to this and maybe position myself, a little bit better within the industry. So I went back and I did a little bit more research and discovered, at the time, it was new at the time, Seneca, again, also, they had just started a paralegal program. I believe it was one of the first, if not the first, paralegal program, accredited paralegal program in Ontario. So I said, okay, let me sign up for this. And because I was already in the workforce, I did it part-time. So it took a few years, but I enjoyed it, and it certainly did build on my knowledge that I had as a law clerk graduate. And I had that under my belt. And while I was working, I was working for a firm that could have used a paralegal. And I said, you know what, I'm in this program now, I'm doing it. When I graduate, you think that you could help me out? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll help you out. So, I went along, I graduated and everything. And, the firm, for some reason, at some point in time, decided that I wasn't suitable for them. And even though I had a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge that was beyond what other people had, other people were getting promotions over me. So that was a challenge that I had after becoming licensed. I didn't let that get me down. So eventually I decided to part ways with that firm, go to another firm, and found more of the same. And also in, job search and that sort of thing, as you know, some like my colleagues and other people in the profession who've probably been who have been in the profession about as long as I have know, job opportunities weren't really great. There weren't many for paralegals at the time, so I ended up just staying in the legal assisting role, and that was what helped me to, of course, live, to help me to pay bills and live and all of those things. So that's why I'm still legal assisting, and I do that mostly. But as a paralegal, didn't give up on it. However, it is something that I do. I do a lot of written advocacy for people, helping them draft pleadings. If somebody needs a strongly worded letter, I'm also a notary, so I do some of that stuff as well. But I've had some challenges, and I have not given up on it, but it's just the challenges have kept me sort of on that, balancing that edge between a legal assistant and a paralegal. And I hope to be able to change that, or help to change that in some way. So that's a little bit about me, maybe too much, but.
Well, thanks so much for sharing, April. And I think it's certainly helpful for a lot of students who think, they certainly have had people on, lawyers and judges, and they hear kind of a story there, but they often worry about, well, what about how do I get through situations where, no, it's not all roses, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to come out of paralegal college or a law clerk program or even law school, right? I mean, I think there's difficulties, there's challenges, certainly even from my own experience that I've shared, that it's important for students to kind of know that, because it gets very discouraging. I think both you and I can relate to that, and thinking, well, hey, nobody's in this position except me. It's good to kind of know that, look, there are other opportunities and there's ways that you can kind of make use of your education as well. So in terms of kind of going through some of those challenges, what did you find that kind of kept you motivated there to look for other opportunities, to find a way to kind of look at doing some legal assistant work as well as paralegal work? Kind of how was that process, and what can you share from people who may be going through similar experiences when they finish, they get their license, they pass the licensing exam, and they're like, okay, so where's the jobs coming from? And then after 3 months, they're like, oh, they're not coming. That's it. I'm giving up on this paralegal career path. What can you share from your experience that help those people out?
Well, it's certainly challenging. It's still challenging today, but what I've noticed, because I always look, and I always seek out different opportunities, at least, or at least look to see what's out there. And I can say today in 2022, there are opportunities out there. More at the time when I first was licensed, there weren't a lot of opportunities, or if there were, they were looking for somebody who was like entry level but 5 years experience, which I never really understood. But now I see that there is more of an influx of jobs where paralegals are sought after. What I would say, though, is that in seeking out those opportunities, don't be discouraged if they don't come right away. Being a paralegal doesn't restrict you to just being a paralegal. You can work as a legal assistant as well, and build some skills and seek some mentorship. And that's another thing that I would say. That was, for me, it wasn't something that I was really going out and seeking. Like I had that sort of lone wolf kind of syndrome where, I felt that, I tried a few times and it looked like I was going to have to do it on my own. So that's another thing, like seek out mentorship wherever you are, whether you're working as an entry level paralegal, whether you're working as a legal assistant, seek out the mentorship. And if you're not getting the mentorship, seek it out somewhere else. The Law Society also has some good resources for that. I'm hoping to, with the Ontario Association of Paralegals, help offer that to people as well. I think the biggest way to get through those challenges is to be resilient. You got to be resilient, because you're going to get knocked down. you are going to get knocked down a lot of times. More people are more receptive to paralegals now, but above all, just be resilient and just continue to seek out resources, continue to network, and just don't give up.
Now, I want to kind of maybe go back to your first experiences there in terms of being a legal assistant, going through the law clerk program, because actually, incidentally, I am just started teaching law clerk students at Seneca. So a good way for me to share with them some of what they may be doing in their future. So could you maybe tell a little bit about, in terms of what types of work there that you can be doing, what's important in terms of skills to develop while you're still a student in terms of being an effective legal assistant or law clerk, or in providing the resources there for, if you can think back even when you were a student there, I know at Seneca, what are some of the things that you may have wished you knew about in practice versus in theory?
Things that I wish that I knew about. Well, I wish that that I mentioned earlier, I wish that I knew that there was going to be a period of time that you'd have to work your way up, because I felt, I don't know how they sell the program now, but when I was in the program, I felt as though they were selling it in the way that once you graduate, you're going to be a law clerk, you're going to be, doing all these things, you're going to be researching. And then when I got out there, it was a lot more administrative than I expected. I mean, and a law clerk position does have its administrative side, but really and truly it should be, you're almost working hand in hand with the lawyer. But so I guess the main thing I wish I knew was that I would have to sort of start at the bottom, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible to rise up. It's not impossible at all. But you definitely have to take a lot of initiative. That's one thing. What else? I think that you have to be prepared for dealing with lawyers. It's very different than having professors who are lawyers, because the professors who are lawyers are very understanding for the most part, and they want to teach you as much as they know so that you get the right footing. But many lawyers are very particular. They value attention to detail for sure. Good listening skills. So just be warned. I'm not saying that you should be afraid of lawyers, but they are very particular, and it's due to their training. It's due to the training that they receive in law school, that everything has to be very particular, and you just have to be really careful and take initiative, really. So
it's funny that you say that. I mean, one of the things I shared with the students last week is, we're learning all these ways to do like formatting. And I said, well, all of this, put that on pause, because you're going to go and work for a lawyer and they're going to say, double space this, double period, it's 2 spaces after the period. And you have to kind of go with the flow, right? I mean, as much as it may be, you may have learned this, and you may be working in an office. I don't know if you work with multiple lawyers, but one lawyer will want it this way and the other one will say, ignore all of that. I want to do it this way, right? So, I mean, there's importance there too, as you said, attention to detail.
Yeah.
And then what made you talked about kind of going through that period of time there, I think a month you said, and then you said, I'm going back to Seneca, I'm going to go get this paralegal license. Kind of what was about there going back into school? What was that like now first doing the law clerk program and then going to become a paralegal? I often have students that, in all the different places I teach have the same sort of trajectory, right? Is that they start off, either they have a program or they've worked in the law firm, and then they go and want to become licensed. What can you share kind of from that experience, and what maybe was different with the paralegal studies versus sort of the law clerk program you had done before?
Okay, well, so I can say that, like, for the reasoning behind why I chose to go back was, I think part of me always wanted to be like a sole practitioner, entrepreneur. I think I always had that in me. I didn't know what field it would be in when I was younger, but I feel like I've always kind of had that sort of spirit. And so again, first month or whatever into being a legal assistant and sort of seeing what, it was going to be about. And I was just like, I don't really know if this is something that I can do forever without having at least some control over what I'm doing. That was the first thing. And also just the element of helping people too. Like I decided that I didn't necessarily want to be helping people from, behind the reception phone or not being able to say more because, as a legal assistant, you are not authorized to give advice and things like that. So I kind of felt restricted in that way. So that was another reason why I wanted to become a paralegal, because I wanted to be able to affect some sort of change for, people who are seeking, access to justice and on that level that a paralegal can offer.
So as we were talking about before,
Yeah.
there now you're kind of doing a bit of both. And I think one of the things there that's important to share with students and those listening is that that's certainly an opportunity that you have, right? Is that you can do a number of different things here and there and provide help and support. I mean, you can have lawyers and paralegals as your quote unquote clients as needed. So maybe you could tell us about how that came about. What are the different types of things you do? Because again, that's a way that you can still be fully immersed in the legal field, but kind of have a little bit of control. And I know there's others that do a little bit of a real estate part-time with a paralegal practice that, or like myself, that teach a little bit and then have a little bit of a practice. So maybe you can share kind of what are the different things, how that came about and how it all fits together with sort of your schedule.
Okay. So, legal assisting, as I said before, legal assisting became the thing that was, financially supporting me at the outset, because there wasn't a lot available for paralegals. So I kind of stayed in that realm and decided to do some of my own work on the side. Because of the fact that can be a bit of a challenge, I tried to sort of stick to legal assisting positions that would allow me a little bit of latitude in terms of my time. I know that when you become, say, a law clerk, that can be very demanding on your time, and you might be spending a lot of overtime hours, drafting pleadings or things like that, doing research for the lawyer. So that's kind of why I've sort of stayed more on the legal assisting side than the law clerk side, so that I could balance the two. In terms of legal assisting, I've done it in a few areas. I've done, there was corporate was where I started. Went to just general, like civil, personal injury. And in personal, I should mention, in personal injury, there are roles for paralegals in personal injury, working with FISCO and things like that. I wasn't necessarily interested in FISCO, but that's available. Just want to mention that. Right now, though, however, which I could say I fell into serendipitously about 5 years ago, was family law. I was in a position, I want to say around 2017, early 2017, where I guess you could say I'd been battered a little bit by just the legal industry. And so I took some time off. I did something else that was not legal for a little while, and just to think, okay, is this something that I want to continue in? And I decided that it was. And so all of the jobs that were available at that time in assisting and clerking were family law. So I said, you know what, let me give it a shot, and ended up working for a very nice lawyer which at the time it was unheard of to have to be working for a lawyer, for me anyway, that was that understanding and mindful of mental health issues and work-life balance and things like that. And so that's where my family law journey began, and I'm still working in family law today, not for the same lawyer, but still working in family law. And along the way, that report that we all know about came out about the family law service provider. The initial report where it was sort of recommended that paralegals get involved in some way. And so I thought, interesting. That wasn't the reason I got into family law, but I said, you know what, this actually, the stars are kind of aligning here. I'm in family law now. It's my time now to learn about this so that I could, in the future, hopefully provide services in that realm. So sorry. So yeah, that's and of course that's another area that future that it's coming together, as I understand, that would be available for paralegals. But one thing that I could say that I learned, recently within the last year, is that there's a lot out there that I never knew about. Tribunals in particular, several hundred tribunals that paralegals could also get into. So, I mean, if there's a particular area of law that you're interested in, and maybe you're not at the level where you want you to represent people just yet, but maybe assist in those types of firms to get sort of the knowledge and get a leg up on, you know, how you can use your skills to break into those areas. On a base level, I would say as a legal assistant, it'll give you the base level skills that if you've never worked in a law firm before, it'll give you the base level skills that you need to be successful, really. Very basic things like scheduling, time management, and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, and certainly on the family legal service provider route that potentially might be available. I know it's going to the Law Society later this month. I was just talking with the treasurer last week. So, I mean, that might be another area that you can get into or finish a program. I think their goal is in a few years to have it all ready to go. But I mean, it's great that you mentioned that, because a lot of times when people are looking for paralegal roles, they don't consider a legal assistant or even through their internship, right, to stay on and work in that capacity, because you do learn a lot of the things that are important, maybe docketing your time, or even just seeing how an application is put together from start to finish. I mean, those are important things to know if you do end up going out on your own or going to a different firm where you can work as a practicing paralegal. So I think it's really important that you're sharing about that, because it's a good way to get into the field and transition from there, right? In terms of knowing what the demands are. And as we were talking about before, I mean, what the expectations from lawyers and paralegals are about the kind of work or the kind of assistance that they need in getting things there. So on that point, we were talking about mentorship, right? And getting mentorship there, getting through that. I mean, certainly it's very difficult if you're going through that without having anyone who's had similar experiences talk to you and say, look, this is what I did, and here's how I got through this process. So let's go and talk about the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. Now, I know you just recently celebrated your 1-year anniversary. So maybe going back to late 2020, or I'm not sure exactly where Deborah and yourself kind of said, well, we need this organization. So maybe you can kind of give us a background of kind of where that came about and how everything got put together in terms of getting started. And then we can certainly follow up on how the first year has gone and what the plans are in the future. So maybe you can tell us where that came from.
okay, so I guess following from some of my own personal challenges, you know, with the sort of the paralegal side of things, I always, and when I was still in school, and I think it was during my field placement, I had met a bunch of other, you know, up and coming, you know, candidates, licensee candidates, and we spoke about creating some sort of organization. And I think what we were calling it was like a Caribbean Paralegals Association. That was what we, or something along that lines, right? And but after we all graduated and everything, we totally lost touch. So that Caribbean Association, it never came to pass. But it was an idea that I had in my mind, and you know, I always thought about it, you know, because I felt like, you know, because of my experience, other people shouldn't have to go through what I went through. And it would be nice to have something like that that is particular to, you know, our demographic that could help. And I believe it was in early 2020, maybe about April, May. I was actually just doing some networking on LinkedIn and ended up stumbling across Deborah. who is the president of the Ontario Association for Black Paralegals, stumbled across her profile and, said, hello, how you doing? How you making it, through the pandemic, that sort of conversation, that was like the typical networking conversation at that time. And, asked her how she's doing, what she's, what her plans were for the coming year and things like that. And strangely enough, she actually shared with me, which, some people wouldn't do. They're not going to share their life with you or any of what they plan on doing. But she shared with me, she said she had some projects that she was working on. And I probed a little further. I said, okay, you want like, what type of projects are you working on? And she mentioned this idea of creating an association for Black paralegals. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, here it is again. So it must be fate. So I've got to talk to her further and see, where we could take this. Right. And I think a few months, 2 or 3 months later, we had a meeting with interested parties, including Deborah, myself, and Royland, who you spoke with last week. And we discussed sort of our ideas of what we thought about the idea of making an association and ideas of what we would offer and things like that. And I think we met a few times before the end of the year and sort of came up with a plan. I don't know if it was much of a plan, but came up with a plan as to how we would start, how we would launch. And before we knew it, we were incorporated. We had a name, Ontario Association of Black Paralegals, which that came together in January of 2021. And from there, we just started planning, events, content. We just mobilized and started thinking about how can we, offer at least at the base level CPD for anybody who's interested. The first year we had a roundtable where we invited a lot of people that had a very good turnout of, people who had heard about the organization and were interested in providing their ideas of how we could help them and help the profession. And towards I guess the end of the year, we got some grants, that are going to help us go forward and develop our program and develop our tools that we're going to be using to assist Black and people, Black professionals, Black legal professionals, paralegals, and law clerks, and people of color, and actually anybody who thinks that the organization can help them. We're just willing to offer whatever services, they need as we develop them. Mentorship being a big one, because that is something that we've heard from people in the profession is something that's lacking. So that is one thing, among other things, but that's a sort of a big thing that we want to offer to the community if they need it.
And that's great. And certainly it's been a very successful first year. So perhaps we can talk a little bit more of some of the highlights there and let's continue on with that mentorship piece, because I think really the paralegal field in particular tends to have a lot more people that are kind of out on their own. And unless you're connecting, and certainly even in the pandemic, it adds another layer of difficulty that you're not connecting in person as much, right? I mean, even over LinkedIn, right? It kind of offers you, it's a little harder, I think. I don't know, maybe it's not in terms of approaching people that are paralegals and are involved in the legal industry. I don't know, maybe you can share a bit about that, but kind of having organizations like yourself, it makes it easier, right? That you can come to an event and there's going to be other paralegals of color, Black paralegals that you can network with that you wouldn't otherwise be able to connect so easily through, or even just kind of randomly, right? I mean, you might just send a quick message and hope that they'll respond, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that and kind of some of the different events. I know I've been to a few of them over the last year that you were successfully able to put together.
Okay, so what I can say is, especially based on what we've heard from people who have given us, their input on the profession and the challenges. and also from some students um, that we had earlier, who gave us some input on their experience from sort of the school side going into the field placement sort of aspect, um, where and this goes to why I think that our model in terms of mentorship is good, is that people of color, as you said, are often going out, as sole practitioners, not necessarily making those, not necessarily networking, making those connections. And what we heard was, uh, it was a little bit surprising that a lot of people, a lot of Black people and people of color they simply don't have the same connections that other people have, and that was an experience that we heard from a few people in terms of finding a field placement where, they would ask their classmates, oh, so where are you going, for your field placement? And the answers they would get was, oh, like I know somebody, family friend, uncle, who has a practice or knows somebody who knows somebody. And for the paralegals of color, or the paralegal candidates of color, they just didn't have those connections. So that's one thing that we wanted to offer for sure, a networking opportunity for students, for professionals to be able to start their career on a positive note by having those connections early on, people that we can connect them with. And oh shoot.
I think it's still okay there. It's just still blur there. I guess you hit the background to change your background there, but no worries. You're
I
still
was like,
good.
oh my God, what just happened? Okay, so yes, that was important for us to be able to create a space where from the very beginning of their careers that they would have that sort of that base that they could build on. And we wanted to create a space where even throughout your career you could come back and you could use these services to propel you and advance your career.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly great, and it makes it a lot easier that you can come to an event and there's going to be people there that, again, you're not going to have to make those connections. It comes more organically, right? You're not going to have to go make those connections out on your own. And in terms of that, I mean, there's certainly students and young paralegals breaking into the profession. So in terms of that particular group in particular there, what can you share about what can the organization offer in terms of supports, in addition to the mentorship piece that they can really benefit from?
In addition to that, we are developing continuing education content, which will be accredited, that they can access either live or by recordings that we'll offer on our website. Topics that are relevant to practice management and accounting and things like that. And of course, it's going to be content that is relevant to Black people and people of color, helping to recognize, helping find ways to let the community know that these are the things that are happening in our community, and bringing awareness to it, and providing tools to professionals to sort of deal with some of the things that can occur in a legal practice, and just ways to navigate that.
Now, certainly this month, looking at February and forever, and for those looking to get into the field, students or those just starting off, what can you share in terms of how things are going, in terms of maybe the direction of the organization, what you're hoping to have in the future to help change that? The fact that you were mentioning very few people of color tend to know experienced lawyers or paralegals, and hopefully again as we get more into the profession that's going to change. But what can we do to better provide support for those that are just breaking into the profession? What else may need to be done? And maybe looking back at it from when you first got into 2022, has there been certainly progress there, and certainly organizations like the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals there can provide more assistance and mentorship there. But what can you share there in terms of looking forward into the future, in terms of building on some of the things that we've been doing, and certainly that your organization has been doing?
Looking into the future, we don't, I mean, providing mentorship and continuing education for the profession are all amazing things, but we want to have more of a community outreach. One of the services that we were discussing in terms of community building and community outreach is being able to provide the community with legal services in sort of the area of human rights, if they need that, if people need that, and just making sure that we are not just we want to help the legal community, but we don't want to just simply be only for the legal community. We want to have programs and events and things like that where anybody really from the community can come and find out what resources we actually do have. And it's still in its infancy in terms of exactly how we intend to offer that, but that is definitely a thing that we've discussed. It's a lot more community outreach. And even one thing that I think that we're all passionate about is outreach into schools at the high school level. So penetrating even deeper to let students know that if this is a career path that they are thinking about, that there is something there at the end of their education that they can reach out to and get the resources that they need. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's an important piece that, especially even in the paralegal community, right? I mean, people know about being a lawyer and going to law school and go to university, and that's a very long path, right? But high school students can see that if you can get into the legal field, and it could be as little as a year from now that you can actually start having clients. And I think that sometimes gets missed, especially again that you don't know about what is a paralegal, right? I think even within the legal community, there's a lot of misconceptions. It's like people watch Suits or something and think, hey, a paralegal, they can't take their own clients, until then they find out. Even lawyers are like, oh, I didn't know that they can represent people at the tribunals, as you mentioned. So I think it's a very important piece there that you're doing and hoping to build on in the future there in terms of getting connected with just the community itself, that there are a lot of resources that you can take advantage of. Now, one of the things you also had mentioned earlier, and we've talked quite a bit with the different practitioners and those involved in the legal field, is taking care of your mental health. Now, the legal industry certainly does no favors in terms of workload and work-life balance, right? In terms of a lot of that. And you mentioned having an opportunity to work for a lawyer that was really recognizing the importance of taking care of your mental health and having the opportunity there. What can you share from your own experiences that we can share with those, again, looking to get into the industry, or students who may have no idea of kind of some of those expectations of how important it is to find that balance and take care of yourself first and foremost before burning yourself out? What can you offer there? And then certainly it's important because a lot of people don't realize that if you don't take care of yourself, then you're not in a really good position to be productive for a firm or for your clients.
Okay, so what I would say is, if you're in a situation where things are getting out of control and things are, you're not in the best state of mind, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak to whoever it is that you work for or work with, and let them know what's going on. Now, that's a very important part, because you could be suffering, and if nobody knows you're suffering, then they're still going to essentially treat you the same way. And when you work for lawyers, because lawyers are very focused and they're very, you know, very precise, as I said before, and they're not necessarily, they won't necessarily pay attention if you're continuing on just doing things without, making them aware. Um, so you really, in terms of mindfulness and mental health, you have to be aware of your own mental health and be willing to name it. I know a lot of people say that, if you name it, then, they might look at you as being weak or, not able to do your job. But to be honest, despite working for some very interesting lawyers, if you do mention it, more often than not, they will take steps to make sure that you aren't burning out, or they could be minimal steps, but for the most part, if you name it, there aren't lawyers out there who are totally heartless and won't want to help you. So that's the first thing. Second, this is speaking from my own experience, that if you are dealing with a situation with a lawyer or a colleague where they are mistreating you, this is something that I personally have been through. Don't be afraid to seek outside counsel. That is one of the things that I regret from my own experience, was that I was literally being berated for no reason by a lawyer every single day for like 2 years. And it ruined my mental health. It really did. And I had to go to counseling and to sort of, I guess, level out, if you want to call it that. But I remember seeing a CPD course years ago with an employment lawyer who dealt with issues like that. And one of the things that she said was, you do not have to tough it out. It doesn't matter where you are in your career. If you're beginning in your career, just trying to build up, it doesn't matter where you are. If something like this is going on, seek outside help. And I mean, if it has to go to, a legal process, it has to go to a legal process, but don't let it fester, because it just gets worse and worse and worse. So, and from the actual professional practice side, something that I think that has helped my mental health is just being organized in time management and all of the things that go on in a legal practice. And if you don't know exactly how to do that, then speak to your colleagues about it, and get some strategies, and it'll help you greatly. And don't procrastinate. Do things when they need to be due, and that actually does reduce a lot of stress on the job as well. And take your breaks. Take your lunch hour, take your breaks. If you have vacation time, use it, because you need time to decompress. You need time away from the office to breathe, to enjoy life. So, those are some strategies that I personally have used.
I'm sorry that you had that negative experience. And I did want to mention for anyone else that's listening, that there is the Law Society has this discrimination and harassment council that's free and confidential. So you don't have to worry about going and paying for a lawyer if you're experiencing someone in the legal industry that is discriminating or harassing you. That certainly is available there. And as well, I mean, what can you share? I mean, because it is very tough. I mean, both with mental health and even facing harassment in the workplace, in the legal field, right? In particular, it's kind of, as you just mentioned there, tough it out, be strong. Otherwise, you're not going to advance. You're facing a lot of that pressure. And what, in terms of trying to balance that and obviously being able to take care of your own mental health, I mean, what can you share with people who are afraid of that exact situation, right? That if I say anything, or if I take care of my mental health, then people are going to see me as weak or complaining or what. I mean, that's kind of that fear why people don't speak up, right? Or that they tolerate situations where they don't want to mention anything because they're afraid of the reprisals or the repercussions. So what can you share, I mean, from going through such a negative experience, that it's okay to go in and discuss that, whether it's outside counsel, whether it's finding time for yourself there. why that's really important, and it's not just tough it up and go forward.
Well, I mean, when you get into a legal profession, any profession, you're there because, you want to be there. You want to help people. You want to do the work. And it's very hard to do the work when you have all of this other stuff on your mind, and the legal profession is a place where, we deal with the public. We deal with the public all the time, and you want to set a good image. In fact, the Law Society mandates it, right? That you want to act with a certain level of integrity, civility, and deal with clients in a certain way. And you just simply can't do that. You can't do your job effectively. You can't treat people with the respect that they deserve if you have these things that are going on that, you haven't dealt with. So I guess that's the reason why I would say that it's important to, not be afraid to speak up and deal with these issues. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you face a reprisal, there are definitely legal steps that you can take, as we mentioned. If you're working in a larger firm, a larger atmosphere, where they actually do have a human resources department, maybe go to them first, and get some strategies on how you can address that with the individuals you're working for or you're working with. That'd be a good place to start, I think, if you have the luxury of human resources. Yeah.
Perfect. So April, thank you so much for joining us here, talking about your background there, as well as the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. And again, looking forward in terms of the future for those who are going to get into the industry. If you have any final words of wisdom for those, I mean, I know as well, maybe you can also talk about, there's an event on Thursday there that you're doing in collaboration with the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers and the Law Society. So I don't know if you have that off hand that you can share where people can register, but yeah, any final words of wisdom there?
Unfortunately, I don't have that on hand. I apologize for that. But yes, there is an event happening in collaboration with the Law Society, Cable, Ontario Association of Black Paralegals. I apologize that I don't have the information on hand, but it is occurring on February 10th, which is Thursday from 6 to 7:30. What I can do is, if JP will allow me, I can provide that information or post it, as an addendum to this session. And definitely I'll be promoting it via, the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals and through my own LinkedIn and other vehicles that that I use.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, certainly, again, we can certainly share the link there afterwards. But then let's maybe any final words of wisdom there for anyone that's been listening about trying to get into the industry, and again, maybe a little bit more about any advice there for getting through some of the initial challenges. Certainly that you mentioned that it's not all roses coming right after finishing a program, whether a law clerk program or paralegal program. You hear, come here, register, whatever the school is, and you're going to go on this pathway to the legal industry. And again, you don't hear about that. There's bumps on the road too. So any kind of motivation there for getting through that. And once again, thanks for joining us today.
Just don't give up. There's going to be some stumbling blocks along the way. Don't give up. Seek out the knowledge, seek out the information, seek out the mentorship, just anything and everything that you can do to equip yourself. You're gonna go into the profession, you're gonna make mistakes, and people might not like it, but mistakes are the seedbed of success. So just keep on going, keep on trying, seek out the resources, and you'll be fine.
Perfect. So thanks again, April, and wish you all the best. And certainly you can always get the information there at the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals website. And thanks for joining us, and take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.